Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 6:30 and we start on time. Thank you all for coming back. I'm sure that most of you were here last night as well. For some of you, maybe the first session that you are attending. So we're going to repeat very briefly what was it that we did in the last couple of days. You're in a tour. Basically, you are in the state of Israel and you're touring the country, going from place to place, and you're being educated by lots of information, and you try very hard to remember every detail, but you cannot, and that's why I advise to you, don't even try. Get to understand some basic principles, and that's all you need. Just enjoy the experience. So visiting the country on a virtual tour, well, it's almost like a real one, minus the fatigue, and minus the excitement, and minus having armed people around you all the time to make you nervous. It's the Middle East after all. So you're missing just a little bit, and if I could spread some falafel smell in the room, that would make the whole experience much more authentic, but that we cannot do yet. So we started basically yesterday with a short introduction about the state of Israel, and then we spoke about the location, how important that was, and how the location affected all of the history of the nation over the years. I showed you the chart with all the colors representing the main eras in the country's history. And then we started touring. We've been to Caesarea by the sea. We went up to Mount Carmel. We saw the plains of Armageddon, spoke about the city of Megiddo. And day two, we invested basically some time to understand daily life around the Sea of Galilee. We spoke about the days of the public ministry of Jesus. We visited Capernaum, the site for the Sermon on the Mount. We had a great boat ride on the lake, and you were singing beautifully on the boat, as all of you remember yesterday. I was impressed. Basically, we're still in Galilee. We're still in the northern part of the country, and welcome to day three. Day number 3 on the tour is going to take us to the most northern borders of the state. They're going to be on the Lebanese and Syrian borders. We're going to speak about the sources of the River Jordan. We're going to visit a place by the name of Dan, named after the tribe. And the river basically is also named after the tribe because the meaning of Jordan is flowing from Dan. So we're going to enjoy the beauty of the land and to speak about the tribe of Dan, a very intriguing story. And then we'll speak about King Jeroboam, the first king of the northern kingdom. We'll speak about the aftermath of Solomon's death, how the kingdom is divided into two. And Jeroboam was the one, basically, that offered to the nation an alternative religion with an alternative holy places, building an altar with a golden calf and temples, and some of it is still standing. So this will be the first part of this evening, and then we'll go to Caesarea Philippi. It's a very short bus ride, and we're going to climb halfway up to the Golan Heights to speak about the days of Jesus once again, and to speak about the city of Caesarea Philippi. That's where Peter made his confession in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 16 about Jesus being the Messiah, a beautiful location. And then we're going to fly in our time tunnel 2,000 years in time to our era because we're going to view into Syria, and we'll say a few words about what happens between the two nations, and maybe a little surprise for you as well. We'll see if you will behave and if you will deserve the surprise. No dessert, nothing sweet, just a piece of a video that will be quite shocking, to be absolutely honest with you. As you know how it works, some of the videos will come up, and more than one person asked me tonight, do you really have a twin brother? No, I don't. But thank you for the question. That means that one of us did a good job, either my twin or myself. It's just kind of a trick. And I have to apologize once again because the audio is not that clear. I will add some subtitles for next time. I'm also learning how to do it right, and your feedbacks are really helping me how to correct and how to improve. Day number 3, we're going to start with a map, as always with a map. And the map that you see in front of you is the map of the Upper Jordan Valley. That's how we call it geographically. You see the Sea of Galilee is down below. I just forget to turn it on. Yeah. Sea of Galilee is over there, and this whole section where the River Jordan flows, we call that area the Upper Jordan Valley. You don't see 3D, however, the mountains of the Golan on one side, and then a very deep valley, the mountains of Galilee on the other side. So that will be the upper Jordan Valley. That's where the river Jordan flows. And if it was 2,000 years ago, in the days of Jesus, when he was walking from the Sea of Galilee up to Caesarea Philippi, there was another lake over here, which is no longer there because it was drained by the state of Israel in 1952 to 1957. As a young nation, we were desperate to have land that we can farm, and that was one potential land, and for that reason, we drained the whole lake over there into the Sea of Galilee. The lake is no longer there. But 2,000 years ago, topography was a little different. And when Jesus walked with his disciples from Capernaum to Caesarea Philippi, he was walking on the shores of another lake that's no longer there. All right, so a few things in the country, speaking about topography, are not the same as they used to be. And then we climb up to the Golan Heights. And the Golan Heights is a very intriguing location because when you hear the name, the first thing that comes to mind will be wars and bloodshed and Syria. Let me submit to you that the most quiet place in the whole Middle East for 50 years now is the Golan Heights. Nothing happens along the border between Syria and Israel. Inside Syria, a brutal civil war for 10 years now, but we are not part of it. And therefore, to make that connection that Golan means violence and bloodshed, it's simply incorrect. It's not a hot spot for a long time. It's a beautiful, serene, and quiet area. But for some reason, people always make that connection. The Golan is a place of violence. It was indeed in the past, but not for the last 50 years or so. So that will be part of the plan for today. And here is the route that we are going to take. We're going to drive from the Sea of Galilee, go to see Dan, go to see Caesarea Philippi, and complete a full circle. We are still staying in a hotel that will be in Tiberias. That will be our base for the time in Galilee, our last day in Galilee. And here is, of course, this colorful, complicated, confusing chart. But when we speak about Dan, we are going to go to the very beginning of the story. We'll speak about the days of the judges, the days of Joshua, days of the Danites. The tribe of Dan makes a very important part of the story of the site of Dan. Let's look at this little video that you see in front of you. And what you see basically is part of Dan. Is it moving? Yes. All right, part of the ancient site of Dan. It's right on the border with Lebanon, by the way, today. And you only see one part of it. You see the temple's area. Now, this place is of great value, not just because it was a temple built by Jeroboam, because that temple was identical to the temple that Solomon built in Jerusalem. Now, from Solomon's temple, nothing was found. And therefore, the closest we can come today to understand the temple built by Solomon is to study and to look at the temple that King Jeroboam built up in Dan. And we'll tell the story, what was his motivation, as the Bible tells us in the chapter 12 of the book of Kings. But we'll start with the tribe of Dan, and here is the story of the Danites, and please bear with me because the details are important. Here's what the Bible tells us about the division of the land to the tribes of Israel. As the whole nation was making the way, getting closer to Canaan, still on the eastern side of the river Jordan, Moses is still alive. The leaders of 2.5 tribes approach Moses asking permission to have their inheritance on the eastern side of the Jordan. Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh. The question is, why was permission needed? A better question, what was the plan? What was the land that was supposed to be divided to the tribes of Israel? Well, the Bible answers the question. Because in Numbers chapter 34, God is taking Moses to Mount Pisgah, above the plains of Jericho, and shows him the land that will be divided among the tribes. And the eastern line of that land is the river Jordan. If you want to have possessions east to the Jordan, which was not the plan according to Numbers 34, you need to ask permission. So Moses gives his consent, but he makes one condition. He says, number one, if you want to have that piece of land, you're going to help your brethren. In fact, you're going to lead the rest of the nation to conquer the land on the western side. You're not staying out of battle. You're going to lead them. And only after you accomplish that, you can cross to the other side. That will be your land. So even before the nation was crossing the river Jordan to conquer Canaan, the land was divided and some tribes had their inheritance on the eastern side. And then the Bible tells us that the tribes of Israel conquer the land, and the tribe of Judah receives its inheritance, and the house of Joseph, there's no tribe called Joseph, right? The names of the tribes named after his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, they received their land. 7 tribes have no land yet in Israel. And the Bible says that Joshua assembled a team and told them, listen guys, you're going to survey the land, make a map, divide it to 7 pieces for the 7 remaining tribes, and we're going to cast lots. So the whole nation gets together to a place called Shiloh. That's where the tent of meeting used to be. And Joshua is calling the tribes' leaders one after the other down to the tent of meeting, my interpretation, my imagination. And there was a basket over there with 7 pieces of parchment, drawings of a map, and he tells one, well, just pick your land. When the leader of Dan reached into the basket and took out a piece of map, if he knew the country, he would go like, uh-oh. The land that the Danites received was the only land of the tribes of Israel that was not in the mountains. It was down in the valley. And I mentioned to you yesterday, the valley was the land of the Canaanites, the land of the foreigners. The Israelites dwelled on the mountain, which means that Dan was the only tribe in Israel that inherited a war zone, basically. Remember Samson? A Danite? What do we know of him? His whole career, an ongoing war with the Philistines. That was the destiny of Dan as well. The tribe of Judah that dwelled on the mountains behind Dan was using the Danites as a human shield, no doubt. They simply had enough. That's the land that we got from God. Well, we are very unhappy. We are going to leave. Big mistake, by the way. Story number 1. Story number 2, and we'll make the connection in just a minute, we'll speak about a man in Israel by the name of Micah. And Micah was a bad boy. That's in Judges 18. Micah stole some money from his mother, 1,100 silver shekels. By the way, a chapter earlier, Judges 17, we read that every Philistine ruler gave Delilah 1,100 pieces of silver. Can we make the assumption then that Micah's mother is indeed Delilah? If you'd like to do that connection, by all means, it's on you. I'm not saying anything. I'm just mentioning what the Bible tells us without calling her by name specifically. So Micah takes the money and then gives the money back. And mom said, Micah, you're a good kid. I'm going to take part of that treasure, I'm going to smelt the silver, and I'm going to make a god. Just a minute. We speak about an Israelite family that worships the God of Israel, and they have a brilliant idea. I'm being sarcastic. Let's make a god. Now, Micah lives very close to Shiloh. Shiloh was the chosen place for Dan. That's where the tent of meeting was. What was she thinking? What was he thinking? The Bible doesn't tell us. But now there is a family in Israel that has an image. An image is not enough. If you want to make your business legit, which is even sacrilegious to say that, you need to have the outfit of a priest, and you need to have a priest. So Micah makes a little vest called an ephod, and looking for the right man to come, and the Bible tells us, I kid you not, it's all there, okay? There is a Levite who is coming from Bethlehem, a freelance Levite looking for a job. And Micah said, bingo, you're the man that I need. Here is the God that we are going to worship. Here is your outfit, your garments, everything is ready. Come and take your position. And the Levite stays. Great social benefits. It's a dream of a lifetime to hold that position. Let's go back now to the Danites. When they choose to leave their location and to choose another location, more quiet, they send a team of 5 people, 5 warriors, and these 5 are heading north. They're going to explore the land. And since the mission is a secret, they're not taking the international arteries. They take a mountain path that goes to the rich parts of the country with water to the area of Galilee. And they go by the house of Micah. And lo and behold, there is a temple over there, and there is a God and a priest. They want a blessing, and the priest blesses them. Your journey, he says, will be a success. And indeed, the party of 5 arrives all the way to this place over there that was called Laish until then, part of the kingdom of the Sidonians. And they think that this place is easy to conquer. So they go back and tell the tribe the good news. We have an excellent location. Let's go and take it. And now they send a whole brigade, 600 people dressed for battle, and they go by Micah's house as well. It worked the first time. But now they want not just a blessing, they want the business. So they take the priest with them. Micah is not home, the Bible tells us. and the priest takes his god with him, and the Danites that have a god now are occupying the place. The whole tribe moves up north, and the whole area is now named Dan, named after the tribe of Dan. So that would be the story basically. What the Danites did not know was that they're replacing one war zone with another. Because you position yourself right on the highway, that means that every invading army, you will be the first one to take the hit. And indeed, Dan was the first tribe that was destroyed, that was exiled. We don't hear about the Danites anymore. They are not in the list of 144,000 that you find in the book of Revelations. But they named the whole area. The river is called the Jordan, flowing from Dan, and the Danites have a new location. And this is a new chapter, if you wish, in the life of a tribe, but also the life of the nation. Let's listen to the following video. In front of you are the headwaters of the river Jordan. This is one of the three tributaries of the Jordan, and this river is called Dan. And what you see down below you are the first drops of water, which is basically purely melted snow. Everything starts as precipitations on top of Mount Hermon, a few miles away from here. And then the water in the due season, after the snow melts, is going through the mountain to feed springs all around the mountain ridge, which is quite a large mountain ridge. Some of it is enriching the largest spring in the Middle East. Annual flow of about 450 million cubic meters of water, and that tributary donates 40% of the full amount of the water that flows in the River Jordan. So out of three tributaries, Dan is the richest one, and we see it now due to the season in its lowest flow, because this is the end of a long dry summer. It carries much more water at springtime when the snow melts on top of Mount Hermon. When you speak about the story of Dan, we speak about a tribe in Israel that received an inheritance by Joshua, by God himself, and after a while they chose to leave the area. I don't want to repeat myself, and I'm not well coordinated with him, so you heard the story already. So moving forward to speak about the second reason why Dan is important, and that will take us to the days of King Jeroboam. Well, here's what the Bible tells us. During the days of Solomon, who was one of the mightiest kings of Israel, but if you read carefully, Solomon ended up to be a real political failure. Everything that his father David conquered for the kingdom, Solomon lost. And something is missing in the way that the Bible tells the story, because we cannot follow action and reaction. We do know that Solomon inherited a mighty kingdom that David conquered for him. We do know that the man invested a fortune, was a very wealthy individual in the whole kingdom, in building three major projects: a temple, an army of war chariots. Solomon had 1,400 war chariots. That's an imperial force. And invested in the largest navy in the region back then, yet lost everything. Now, we do not understand why a king that lost parts of his kingdom never retaliated, never used the army to reconquer what was lost. So we're missing part of the story. We know that back in the days of Solomon, in Jerusalem, silver was like stones and gold was like stones. Well, who enjoyed that prosperity? One tribe only, the king's tribe, the tribe of Judah. All the others were very, very unhappy. So something is bubbling underground, and when Solomon dies, there was a new situation because somebody was anointed king already during the life of Solomon. That somebody was a young, impressive man by the name of Jeroboam that came from the tribe of Ephraim, one of Solomon's officials. And he had an encounter with the prophet from Shiloh. His name was Ahijah, and the prophet tells Jeroboam, listen, thus says the Lord, after the death of Solomon, you will be king over 10 tribes in Israel. And to prove that to him, he's taking off his brand new garment and cuts it to 12 pieces and tells Jeroboam, pick up 10. These are 10 tribes of Israel, and you will be king. We have a problem with the numbers here, because we do know that the tribe of Judah will be left all by themselves plus Benjamin. And we do know that the tribe of Simeon was located south to Judah. If you're south to Judah, you cannot be part of the northern kingdom. Geographically, it's simply impossible. So let's settle for 9 and 3, all right? And not 10 and 2. You know what? 9.5 and 2.5. Because the very line between the two kingdoms went through Benjamin's territory. Solomon is still king, and Jeroboam has a promise, and he has to flee to Egypt. But after Solomon dies, he's coming back to take his position. Now think about the drama. Solomon has a son. His name is Rehoboam. Don't be confused. Jeroboam, Rehoboam. We call them the Boam brothers. They were not brothers. Ray and Jerry. Okay, that's how we can remember them. Rehoboam, 41 years of age, is hardly wait for Solomon to die so he can take his position. I think about Prince Charles sometimes when I speak about how much you are eager to wait until your parent dies. And now the king is dead. And he's the new one. And maybe he knew that there may be a problem because Jeroboam could not keep it as a secret, his position. He had lots of followers. So when the time comes, and Rehoboam wants to tell the elders of Israel, I am your new king, pay your taxes, sayonara. Big surprise, Jeroboam is back. And Jeroboam is leading the nation to rebellion, and there was an official split, and the kingdom is now divided into two. 1 Kings 12 tells the whole story. So now Jeroboam is the king of the northern part of the kingdom and has a major problem. The God of Israel gave him a kingdom. How can you thank the God of Israel? How can you worship him when this God ordered one place of worship that happens to be where? In Jerusalem, enemy's territory. I'm not taking Jeroboam's side, but you need to understand his dilemma. And the Bible tells us, reading his mind, my people will go to Jerusalem as they were commanded to visit the temple. They will be brainwashed by Rehoboam's people. They'll come back and kill me. That's what the Bible says. So the king took counsel. What shall we do? And the answer was, we should establish a new system that will replace the one in Jerusalem. So the king built two temples, a replica of those in Jerusalem. You want to convince your people not to go to Jerusalem, and they've been there already, they know how the temple looks like? You better build something that will be at least as nice as Solomon's temple. And you tell them, listen, it's so far away. Why take this dangerous journey? Here are your gods, Israel, who brought you out from the land of Egypt. Two temples were built, one in Dan. It's still there. Big parts of it are still there. The problem wasn't that much the building. The problem was the golden calf. That was strictly forbidden. So Jeroboam built two, marking the borders of the kingdom. Taking a sidetrack for a minute, today we do not comprehend things in the same way as back then, which is obvious. But here is the mindset of an average person, including Israelites. The God that we serve is not universal. The God that we serve is a national God. If other people serve my God, and I will be in conflict with them, my God has to choose sides. He may not support me, he may support the enemy against me. And therefore, you don't share your God with others. The God was a God of a nation, and his power was limited. And you have to mark the borders where your God reigns by temples. So Jeroboam built two, one in Dan and one in Bethel. The prophet Amos is mentioning a temple in Gilgal on the eastern side, and there was one on the western side. Now today we know that God is everywhere and is universal and is reigning forever. But back then that was not the understanding, that the gods basically belonged to a certain nation. That was the idea. So Jeroboam is building two, marking the territory where God reigns. Amazing. The sister kingdoms are worshiping the same God in a totally different way. So for Jeroboam, it wasn't just building buildings or temples. You need to ordain priesthood. Well, the Bible says the line of Aaron, yes, but the line of Aaron was going back to Jerusalem, who you're going to ordain. So he's ordaining cousin Benny. And then you have to have an outfit, and you have to ordain feasts, which are not biblical either. We speak about a whole nation that is turning aside, basically, still believing we worship the God of Israel. You see where they did the excavations in this round structure over there, the well over there, they found a countless number of bones of animals, which were basically the sacrifices. Kosher animals. They did not offer pigs on the altar. They did not offer camels. So you are selective in what way you want to keep the word of God. Wrong location, wrong priesthood, wrong everything, but you're very careful only to offer kosher animals. Well, people maybe were satisfied. So here's the structure that we see in Dan today. You see the elevated platform, that's where the temple used to be, and the golden calf. Down below, you see the altar. Well, we just added here to the sketch, it's not there, just an aluminum structure, but if you cover that, that's where the altar used to be. And hey, there is a staircase that goes up. That's a problem. The Bible says that with the altar in the tabernacle, it should be a ramp, not a staircase. It's very important, because people did not wear underwear back then, and when you're climbing stairs and somebody stands under the altar, they can see under your garment. I'm sorry, you have to be practical. If you have a ramp, you don't have to lift up your feet. That's what the Bible says, using the very same words. So it's close enough to Solomon's temple, and it gives us an idea about how the temple in Jerusalem used to look like, and that's a big value of this temple. After the death of Solomon, Jeroboam, who was in Egypt, is coming to take his position as king as promised to him by the prophet from Shiloh. I'm sure that you all recall. And Jeroboam, the Bible says, had a major problem. The people from his own kingdom now are going to go to Jerusalem as they were commanded to the temple that Solomon built. And the Bible says that Jeroboam thought these people are going to be brainwashed by Rehoboam's men. They'll come back and kill me. If you go to 1 Kings 12, you have the whole story over there. So Jeroboam took counsel. And the Bible says he decided to build a place as an alternative to Jerusalem, which tells us something very important. Since everybody has been to Jerusalem already, if you want to convince them that this place is as good as Jerusalem, at least the building has to be very similar to Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. Well, I'm sitting there, just a minute, on the stairs, okay, which are from the days of the temple of Jeroboam. You do see one style of stone dressing, and you see another one which is over here. So we speak about two different eras. We speak about the length of time that this place was used as a temple. They found in the excavations an inscription that says, "Holy to the God of Dan," in Greek, 2nd century. That's 800 years after Jeroboam's days. Who was the God of Dan that people worshipped? We don't really know. But once a holy place, always a holy place, and this is the important thing to understand. So we spoke about the altar and the temple. Let me say a word about the Gatehouse, because this is an important part of the story as well. And the drone is moving. By the way, everything was done through COVID days, and we could not get permission, so we drove outside the site and flew the drone from over there. And since it's close to the Lebanese border, you don't do that, right? The Air Force was nervous, and we were almost arrested. We should have known that. You do not fly a drone above the Israeli-Lebanese border, period. We did. How stupid of us. Anyhow, we're looking now at the gates, and this was the main entrance to the city, the Israelite one, from the days of Jeroboam, Ahab, and on. And you do see the whole plaza over here. You see the walls, you see the entrance to the city. This is one of the classical examples of a gatehouse in the country, and let me show you some of the details. Number one, you do have the access road, and keep in mind we are on the highway, so this will be part of the international road. You do have over there the entrance to the gatehouse, and out here something amazing was found. And last day of a dig in 1993, the 30th of August, they found a stone. And on that stone there was an inscription. The only place outside the scriptures the name of David was found is in that specific stone. An amazing discovery. Many people that question the integrity of the Bible will say that David, maybe a small chieftain of a small tribe in Jerusalem, there was never a mighty king or a mighty kingdom. If proof was needed, because you don't need to prove anything here, that would be it. Because that stone speaks about David as the founder of a dynasty. It says the following, somebody's bragging, I killed, it says, 2 kings in one day. King Jehoram, the son of Ahab, and King Ahaziah from the house of David. Now you go to 1 Kings 22, the Bible says who killed those 2 kings. It was Jehu. Well, Jehu was not the one who wrote that inscription over there. It's not in Hebrew. It's in Aramaic. Now we do know that Jehu was a vassal king of the king of the Arameans. So we can build up a story here that the order to kill these 2 kings came from the master of Jehu, and Jehu was the executor. So what the Bible tells us, we found it in writing, including the name of David, which is quite amazing. So this is one of the important discoveries that were made in the country. And you do see pieces of the stone over there. It says in with the white letters over here, the house of David, again, a great discovery. Let's have a word about the gatehouse, because gatehouses are critical to understand in the days of the first temple. A gatehouse was not just a breach in the wall. It wasn't just an opening for people to go in and out. When people live in layers one above the other, the top is basically covered with structures. There is no room for any kind of interaction, which means that the only place that people can convene, people can get together, will be at the gate. I'm going back, okay. Just a minute, we'll run that again, okay? No. No. Something will happen eventually. No. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I knew it's going to happen. Nope. Okay, let's just stop here at the gate. The point was to show you that it's not just a breach in the wall. We've got the whole room inside the gate. Since there was no room on top of the hill, all the interaction, social, judicial, commercial, will take place at the gatehouse. It was not just the entrance and exit from town. That was the gathering place. And the Bible speaks about the gatehouses in so many occasions, the elders of town. That's where they used to judge the people, and that's where justice was done to be seen by everybody. If you sentence somebody to death, you have to do that in front of everybody at the gate, because justice had to be done and to be seen. So the gate was basically the center of all the hustle and bustle in the life of the city. If you go to Proverbs, the last chapter, the Bible speaks about a woman who is working so hard for the family. She's so industrious. She wakes up early in the morning, and she bakes and she cooks, and she's basically the center of the family. What does the husband do? My kind of job. Sits at the gate, singing her praises. Well, he's the elder, and therefore his job is to sit at the gate. So the gatehouse was a place of the local judge, the town magistrates. The throne was over there. So when you speak about the gate, it's not just going in and out from the city. That was basically the most important location in the city life, and so many things happen at the gate, and the Bible speaks about it. When Lot is in Sodom, he's waiting at the gate just to invite people home, people that came to the town a little too late and the gates are closed, so he's waiting at the gates in order to see who may need some assistance. Everything happened in and around the gatehouse. The last thing about them, which is really intriguing, is that the first event that we have in the Bible that we can prove archaeologically is connected also to them. In Genesis 14:14, the Bible speaks about the abduction of Lot. Lot, the nephew of Abraham, was abducted by the 4 kings, and Abraham was told about that. He's recruiting his clan, and he starts his pursuit to rescue Lot. And the Bible tells us he came to the gates of Laish. Abraham came to the gates of Laish, and the amazing part of the story is that in excavations conducted in the town of Eble, northern Syria, they found the royal archive, and lo and behold, there was a document that speaks about the 4 kings that went to do battle against the 5 kings, including the names of those kings. Absolutely amazing. So we try to find archaeology in the scriptures. The first time we can say what the Bible tells us indeed happened, we can prove that, is indeed that journey. Abraham is not mentioned there, but the Bible tells us he came to the gates of Laish. Well, this is part of the amazing part. Here are the gates of Laish. What you see in front of you over there, Abraham saw with his very eyes, and there's no doubt whatsoever. What you see behind me is absolutely amazing. You see a structure of a gate, which is at least 4,000 years old, and this is the most ancient one that stands on the surface of our planet today. Not easy to see, but there is a patch of dark brown dirt over there, and right around it there are bricks which are forming a shape of a gate, of an arch. I'm sure that most of you were taught in school that the Romans invented the arch. This is 2,000 years more ancient than Rome, and therefore the Romans did not. But the amazing thing is that I can tell you without any doubt whatsoever that those bricks that you see in front of you, Abraham himself saw the very same bricks nearly 4,000 years ago. Let's go to Genesis 14, verse 14. The Bible speaks about a war between the 5 kings and the 4 kings. The 4 kings won the battle, and one of the 5 kings who were defeated was the king of Sodom. And the Bible says that Lot, Abraham's nephew, was abducted by the 4 kings. And then the Bible says the messenger came to Abraham the Hebrew and told him the bad news. Abraham recruited his clan. For some reason, the Bible gives us the number of people, 318, and started his pursuit. And the Bible says clearly, Abraham came to the gates of Laish, and then he went on to Damascus almost and rescued his nephew Lot. But this is amazing to think that you can be standing on the Damascus Road to Dan, the very same stone that Abraham stood as well. It doesn't say he came into the city, but he came to the gates of Laish. So with some imagination, if you remove the dark brown area, that would be the entrance to ancient Laish, the same town that the Danites will conquer a few centuries later. There are 47 layers of bricks made of mud, which is the local soil, and part of the thing is authentic. Some is obviously reconstructed. But the general structure, that's what makes it such an amazing discovery. The most important that was made here in Dan, maybe speaking about biblical significance, one of the most important places in the whole world. Other things that were found in Dan, as I mentioned earlier, was the inscription in Greek about the god of Dan. That will be identical to the shovel that removed the coal from the altar of incense in the temple in Jerusalem, was found in Dan as well. As we said, if you want to convince your people that your temple is as good as Solomon's temple, you make everything as an exact replica of the temple in Jerusalem. So we're leaving now the site of Dan. We'll take a short bus ride, and the road will take us now to Caesarea Philippi. And before we get there, just to set the scene for a minute, if I may. Herod the Great died at 4 BCE. Now, some of you will tell me, just a minute now. He could not have died 4 BCE because Herod was still alive when Jesus was born, right? He is the one that murdered all the babies in Bethlehem. What year was Jesus born, by the way? Can anybody enlighten me? We don't really know. And that's exactly part of the issue. Because the name Herod is a general name that describes the whole line of Herod. Herod the Great was the founder, but all of his descendants were also called Herod plus additional name. So we do know, because we have enough documents and dates to compare, Herod the Great died 4 BC, replaced by his 3 sons. Herod's will, that was approved by the Senate in Rome, divided the kingdom into 3. His older son was Herod Archelaus. This is the man that the Bible speaks about, almost no doubt. And he was appointed to be the king of Judea, Samaria, including Jerusalem, Caesarea. The other son was Herod Antipas, the man that beheaded John the Baptist. And the third one, the young one, was called Herod Philippus, and he was appointed to be the king of the Golan area. He was the one that will found a new capital, Caesarea Philippi. All right, so we saw Caesarea by the sea, and here was another Caesarea, which is named after Philippus. So when Jesus was on his way from the shores of the Sea of Galilee to go up to Caesarea Philippi, he was coming from the land of Herod Antipas into the land of Herod Philippus. The names are not that important. But the Bible tells us there was an issue between those half-brothers, the sons of Herod, but not the sons of the same mother. All right, so there was a tension between those half-brothers. And when Jesus goes from Capernaum, he's crossing a border basically into the land of Philippus. And for some reason, he chooses to take his disciples to a center of pagan worship. The Bible doesn't tell us the motivation why go to Caesarea Philippi. But Caesarea Philippi was built as a Roman city, Roman style, a lot of temples over there to worship pagan gods. And for some reason, that was the place that Jesus chose to take his disciples. The Bible says the region of Caesarea Philippi is believed to be the very city. It's a beautiful location. The beauty of the land and nature over there is absolutely amazing. Let's go back and come on. So when you speak about Caesarea Philippi, we speak about the Roman era. Once again, we speak about the days of Jesus. How do you choose a place of worship in the pagan world? In most cases, we speak about natural beauty. Every place outside the cities that has a nice spring, a big cave, an amazing tree, sooner or later you will connect that to the God of nature, to the goddess of nature, to this God, to that God. It's a beautiful location. Joshua 13:5 tells us that one of the gods of the Canaanites was worshipped under Hermon. That's under Hermon. So this place was a place of worship long before the days of Caesarea Philippi. And if you are choosing such a location, these are the criteria to point at the place to say, well, this is a place that we should celebrate the gods, and Banias or Caesarea Philippi is one of them. But there was another reason, and that was another main road. A road that connected the rich harbor of Tyre with Damascus. This is the Damascus Road that Paul is going to take later on to go to Damascus. So Caesarea Philippi was a major crossroad that all the trade of Damascus with the Mediterranean went through its territory as well, plus the international artery, a place of much significance and a place of great beauty as well. Not that easy to see, but you'll hear and you see the water in just a minute. That's where the River Jordan begins. The first drops of water are coming from the rock over there. But back in the days of Jesus, and this is the important part, the water was flowing, or the spring was flowing from the cave that I showed you a minute ago. Oh, come on. I'm apologizing. Something I'm doing wrong here with the technology. And, you know, I'm trying to talk to the laptop, but it won't listen. All right. You see the cave over there, water was flowing from the cave. Is to try to see how that used to look like when the city was still standing, which means we need to use some imagination because the whole area did not look like that. At the big cave over there, that's where the spring used to flow from. And it went all the way down and joined the other sources of the River Jordan. So this is one of the three tributaries of the river. And the famous road, the road that went all the way to Damascus, was going just outside this area. The place started as a holy site. Look at the beauty of nature, and this is something that the Greeks and the Romans worshipped all the time. You see there was a nice spring coming from the cave. It's so verdant and green all around you. That will be a great place of worship. Even the book of Joshua, chapter 5, verse 13, is mentioning a place called Baal Gad that was at the foot of Mount Hermon, which means a place of Canaanite worship that was embraced by the Greeks later on. If you look at the cliff face in front of you, you see quite a lot of niches. That was the holy compound, or the Acropolis, or the upper city, and each one was housing a statue. It started, as Josephus Flavius tells us, as a temple to Caesar Augustus and to the Roman god of nature, half man, half goat, that was called Pan. And then it developed to be a whole complex that had more than one temple. Scholars argue about 6 or 7 shrines were built on this elevated platform. You do see some of the niches. Next to some of the inscriptions were found. And the most intriguing one is what they call the Shrine of the Dancing Goats. We find a coin here, and it shows goats standing almost like human beings on their upper legs and holding hands and dancing. Quite a unique discovery that was found here. So we do not know exactly what kind of practice they had. Nothing like that was found any other place. It's one of the unique discoveries made here in Banias. If you look closer, you can see some of the inscriptions which are just outside those niches. Fill them up with your imagination with some images, and that's how the place used to be back then. And keep in mind, that will be the place where Jesus brought his disciples, according to Matthew 16, and asked the question, maybe right here, who do people say that he was? And then more directly, who do you say that I am? And you know, Peter was the one that made his confession. Interesting to know that Jesus brought his disciples to a place, a center of pagan worship. The Bible gives no reason why. This is just the description that we have in the scriptures. Well, to try to make another connection here, it doesn't freeze. I'm sorry about it once again. The big cave that you all saw, it was believed by the Greeks that every cave is the gateway to Hades, and Hades was the god of the underworld. Which means when Peter makes his confession, and Jesus says even the gates of hell will not prevail against that, maybe pointing at a cave, that would be a very powerful message. Because everybody knew that every cave was the gateway to the kingdom of Hades. So if indeed they were standing by the cave, when Peter made his proclamation and Jesus responded, that will be a very powerful message. But why would a Jewish rabbi, speaking about Jesus, will approach his disciples, simple fishermen, by mentioning a Greek god? Were they even familiar with the Greek mythology? Because sometimes we think that the disciples of Jesus, most of them Galileans, were a group of simple individuals that were not that well educated, that did not have a diploma from Cornell or from Yale, what did they know about the Greek world? Well, we need to challenge that. Because by the fact that you live around the Sea of Galilee and you live on the main highway, you traded with everybody. You would speak Aramaic, you would speak Greek, you knew some Latin, you knew the Greek way of life. So when you want to make a statement and you're using the names of Greek gods, for example, they were familiar with it. Now that's not easy to understand because we said that the Jews tried to separate themselves from the influence of the Greeks. But you cannot do that totally. So even some simple fishermen that lived on the shores of the lake were well versed in the Greek mythology and the Greek stories. And to take them to a center of pagan worship and to point at the cave and to speak about the gates of hell, the gates of Hades, that will teach us something about their world and about the statement that Jesus made pointing at the cave, believed to be the gates to Hades. So that will be the significance of Caesarea Philippi, which is a beautiful location. And we start climbing now to the Golan Heights because we need to accomplish another area for today. When people speak about the Golan, we'll speak about the northern eastern part of the state of Israel today. That will be the region around here between Syria on one side and Galilee on the other side. Now you all know the name. It was part of Syria until 1967. After the Syrians launched an attack on Israel, June the 9th of 1967, in our retaliation, we conquered the Golan Heights. It is in Israeli hands ever since. And only 3 years ago, once again, President Trump officially recognized that the Golan Heights is indeed Israeli territory and should not be negotiated. That was quite an amazing statement, I have to say, and we really enjoy that because the Golan has its modern significance as it has its ancient significance as well. So we are going to continue and we're going to climb to a nice vista on the Golan Heights in order to look into Syria and say a few words about the two countries today. Some data about the Golan Heights, not a very large area as you can tell. 25 volcanoes, give or take, that produce a certain landscape, which is a big basalt plateau. These volcanoes are dormant for many centuries now, but once upon a time very active. In 1967, the place is in Israeli hands. The Syrians tried to retake it in 1973 and failed again. So the Golan Heights are in Israeli hands and not on the negotiation table as we speak now, but it was. And it may be in the future as well. About 50,000 people make the population, and Israel officially proclaimed the Golan Heights Israeli territory, and that was in 1981. It's a beautiful landscape, and Mount Hermon is dominating the whole area. And many people believe that mountain to be the Mount of Transfiguration. All the Bible tells us in the Gospel of Matthew 17 is that 6 days after Jesus was in Caesarea Philippi, we just visited the place, he took his disciples, 3 of them, went up a high mountain, and that's where he was transfigured. No name is mentioned. But since there was a high mountain close enough to Caesarea Philippi, it is believed to be one of the sites of the Ascension, of the Transfiguration. In Jewish tradition, we believe that that's where God showed Abraham the land. You go to Genesis 15, the Bible speaks about the promised land for the first time, but the Bible doesn't say a mountain. The Bible said that God took Abraham out of his tent and showed him the place. Well, it is our tradition that it happened also on top of Mount Hermon, which is the highest mountain in the region, about 9,000 feet above sea level. We are standing on top of the Golan Heights. Today, the Golan Heights cover the north and eastern corner of the state of Israel. Once upon a time, the place was known by another name. It was called Bashan. Some of you may recall that one of the kings that Moses had defeated was the giant King Og of the Bashan. When the land was occupied by the tribes of Israel, the inheritance of Manasseh, that was part of it. And we do know that Manasseh covered the largest area among the tribes of Israel, and half of it that dwelt on the eastern side of the Jordan, that included the area of Bashan as well. We also given some information in the Bible about the way of life up here. We speak about an area which is basically a big plateau made of lava. More than 25 volcanoes we have, all dormant for many centuries now, but once upon a time they were erupting and billions of tons of lava came from those volcanoes to cover the whole area. It's a big basalt plateau. It's the richest part of the country with precipitations. So you have an area which is covered by boulders, and without the machinery to move them, farming is impossible. On the other hand, lots of green vegetation, which means excellent grazing grounds. And indeed, when the Bible speaks about Bashan, it speaks about livestock and about cattle. If you go to Amos chapter 4, verse 1, the prophet is rebuking the women of Samaria for the wicked way of life, and he calls them big, fat cows of Bashan. How offensive, but you make your point very clear. The psalmist, Psalm 22, speaks about his condition. He is in danger, he is distressed, and he says, I am encircled by massive bulls of Bashan. Indeed, even today, growing cattle is one of the main money makers for the farmers, Israeli farmers, on the Golan Heights today. The name Golan appears in the Bible as well by that name in the book of Joshua, chapter 20. Joshua designated 6 cities of refuge, 3 on the eastern side of the Jordan. One was called Golan. So maybe someplace around here, that city of refuge used to stand. We do not know the exact location. Centuries later, the place was given to King Herod the Great in the days of Jesus, and Herod brought up tens of thousands of Jewish settlers, and he was the king that was behind the big project of covering the area with people, towns, communities. Some of the ruins of these communities you can see until this very day. Maybe Gamla is the most famous one. It's a story that we're going to mention maybe later on. Okay, and since the Golan is always connected to violence and warfare, I will show you that for just a minute. Until about 5 years ago, when you went up to the Golan Heights, you could see into Syria, and you could actually see the war going on in front of your very eyes. We speak about the regime tried to hold on to its positions over there. We speak about the militias of the rebels. It was amazing. You can actually stand there, you're not in any kind of danger, and you see in the distance fire, and you can hear the machine guns and the artillery fire. Amazing. And since we are connected together, all the guides, whenever something happened, we would call, come quickly because the war is going on. We would leave the itinerary, we would go straight up to the Golan Heights. I know that was wrong to do, but when you tell people that what they see in front of them is not kind of a drill, and it's not kind of a Hollywood, this is a real war going on, you should see the expression on the faces. So we speak about tragedies that happens right in front of your very eyes, and let's see if you can basically pick something up of it. That's in Hebrew, obviously. We're quite shocked to see that. You see the smoke in the horizon? You can hear the gunfire and tanks maneuvering. It's too far away. But this was absolutely amazing to see into Syria, to see how people basically kill one another to dominate the whole area. So this was, until about 4 years ago, the Syrian side of the Golan Heights was indeed a battlefield. Well, let's say a few words about current events between the two countries to bring that today to conclusion. Look at the picture in front of you. And if I want to mark the border between the two countries, I can do that very easily. I can only have to tell you, follow the green area. The green side is Israel. The non-green side is Syria. Now, it's quite amazing because the soil is the same amount of rain falls on both sides, and the Israeli side is green, the other side is not. And yes, I'm proud to say that we're dedicating a lot of efforts to try to farm the land. It's more than just a source of income, it's a principle. If you have roots in the land, you'll possess the land. You don't just live on the land, you live off the land. And think about the efforts of removing the boulders and removing the minefields as well. The Golan Heights are covered with millions of landmines. So we'll take the risk. And we'll clear the mines and we'll clear the boulders. And as you can tell, beautiful green area for the first time ever that people live in the Golan Heights to cultivate the land. That was not done ever before. So when you look at the border in front of you, you look at the picture, it's very hard to tell where is Syria and where is Israel. I can say the same thing about Lebanon. If you take a bird's view of the whole Middle East, the green side is Israel. And we take a lot of pride in what was accomplished in such tough conditions vis-à-vis Syria and other countries in the region. Let me try to say one word about politics, and we have to do that speaking about the Golan Heights. Here is a map of the Middle East in front of you, and you do see that the Syria, although it's not a very strong country, but its location right here is very strategic. The arrow shows you basically Iran on one side, although the name is not there, and you do see Lebanon on the other side. That's where the biggest proxy of Iran dwells, and that will be Hezbollah in Lebanon. And here is the state of Israel. Now you need to understand that the only threat that we have to our existence, and we take it seriously, is not Syria and not the Palestinians, it's Iran. Iran says day and night what is their plan, and I do know that your president and my prime minister stated officially Iran will not have nuclear weapons. With all due respect, they will have nuclear weapons. Too late to stop them, all right? And therefore, this is our main concern. And while the whole world is dealing with the nuclear deal, we are concerned about what happens on the ground every day. And the plan of Iran is to have proxies as close as possible on Israel's borders. So the war goes on all the time. You don't see brigades of tanks moving to conquer land, but there is a war that goes on all the time. We try to stop these proxies. We are taking out warehouses full of weapons in the Damascus airport. We don't say it's us, but who else can that be, huh? So you do understand that something happens on a daily basis, although what takes the world's attention is the nuclear deal. Iran will have nuclear weapons. We have the best defense system in the world, so we are protected, we are okay, we can retaliate. I'm not going there right now, and you know, if God is with you, who can be against you? But we need to understand the location of Syria. Iran cannot get to supply their proxies in Lebanon unless they go through Syria. And for that reason, the last American stronghold, if you wish, in Syria, it was evacuated recently, was right along this corridor to try to stop the flow of weapons to go through Syria as close as possible to Israel. Which means that there was an interest in Israel to try to cut the deal with Syria. In 2007, Israel and Syria were engaged in peace talks. It was all kind of secret, nobody spoke about it. But here is the logic behind that. If Syria is willing to control its territory, so Iran cannot send the weapons into Lebanon, that will be a severe blow to the attempt of Iran to try to have more property and more strongholds on Israel's borders. What Syria wanted in return was always the Golan Heights. They said, if Israel is willing to give us back the Golan Heights, we are willing to negotiate. And for years and years in Israel, we said, no way. We are very strong. We don't need to negotiate. We don't need Syria on our side. Well, there is a new mindset now. Because if Syria is willing to try to stop the flow of weapons from Iran into Lebanon, and what they want in return of the Golan Heights, that may be a decent price to pay. So the two countries were negotiating, and we made an agreement that was almost officially signed. Syria agreed that the Golan Heights will be maybe theirs, but it will be a demilitarized zone. The Syrian army will not be deployed in the Golan Heights. Syria agreed that Israel will keep one intelligence stronghold on top of Mount Hermon, so we can see what happens in Syria, not to be surprised as we were in 1973. The two countries were very close to sign a deal. We hesitated. We hesitated because we did not know how strong is the regime in Syria. And fortunately, we were right. Because if we had given the Golan Heights back to Syria, with all the chaos in Syria, then we would have ISIS on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. They no longer exist. Actually, they're coming back, all right? ISIS was not defeated. Just for your attention, there was a comeback that they planned, and they started already. So fortunately, we decided not to finish the negotiations because we did not know how stable is the regime in Syria. But in the future, if things are going to change once again, this mindset may prevail. Because we have one main concern: how to stop the Iranians as far as possible from our borders. And Syria, therefore, as weak as it is, as a regime and country, is a key player. We want to bribe them if necessary. You want the Golan Heights? It's a matter of Arab pride. We'll give it the Golan Heights. But here's what we want in return. Today, nobody speaks about that because Syria doesn't exist anymore. There was no such sovereign country with central government to control the people. Today it's Turkey, today it's Iran, today it's Russia. So the Syrian regime doesn't have any power, any control, any influence. If you'd ask me, they need us more than ever before. If Syria wants to survive as a nation, they need to make peace with Israel. But I'm not the prime minister and I'm not a politician, just a crazy idea. So speaking about what happens between the countries, that's what we need to understand. That we consider Iran as the ultimate enemy, and whatever we can do to keep them away from our borders, we will, including compensating Syria if necessary by giving back the Golan Heights. Unfortunately, we know how to destroy our own communities. We did that to make peace with Egypt. We destroyed communities and gave Sinai back to the Egyptians for peace, and it's working. For the last 40 years, Israel and Egypt are at peace. No, we don't like each other. But nobody's getting killed along the border. We can work with the same deal vis-a-vis Syria, if we can trust the Syrian regime. Right now we cannot because there is no Syrian regime. So with this optimistic message, I'd like to bring this session to conclusion, just to show you the bulls of Bashan. After all, we spoke about the bulls of Bashan and some other nice pictures like Nimrod's castle. Guess what? We have snow in Israel as well. Huh? It snows in Jerusalem as we speak for the first time in years. Well, that's how the Golan Heights looks like today. Wine is the main industry on the Golan Heights, and for the first time ever, the place is not just covered by boulders and landmines, but it's covered by beautiful vineyards and beautiful fruit trees, berries of different kinds, and cherries. It's cherry country, it's wine country, etc. Okay, folks, it's 7:30. Once again, I apologize about sound technology. I hope I won't have it in the next session. Try to see what was wrong. Be back in 10 minutes. We're going to leave Galilee, and we are going to make our way basically to Jerusalem, but we're not going to speak about Jerusalem today. Tomorrow, we're going to go to the Dead Sea, and you're going to float in the lake, which is really, really fun. And then we'll go to Jerusalem. Thank you, and be back, please, in 10 minutes so we can continue. We are standing on top of the Golan Heights. Today, the Golan Heights cover the north and eastern corner of the state of Israel. Once upon a time, the place we are standing on top of as long as the music goes. Oh, yes, Simon. Okay. Thanks God for computer geniuses. Mark told me a few things. Yeah, well, no, not me. Mark. Thank you, Mark. I know that you explained that to me in details. I just don't remember any of it, but that's my problem. No, that will work. Well, folks, welcome back. And after 3 days making our way to Galilee, in the Golan Heights, we are leaving Galilee, and we start heading south. And day number 4, you see, the way that we try to arrange everything is to build up the story before we get to Jerusalem. By the time you get to Jerusalem, you need to be knowledgeable about the country, because if you thought that you received a lot of information so far, well, we're just warming up, because when you get to Jerusalem, the details are important. So we always prefer to start a tour not in the busy city and not to dive straight in to give you all the information, but to build up the story in the beautiful serene mountains of Galilee and the Sea of Galilee. And we want to share enough information for you as a good base, because when we go to Jerusalem, we need to really add the details. And by then, most people pass the exam, and there is an exam as we drive to Jerusalem. If not, we leave you in Jericho, and you can make your own way home. That's how it works usually. With Calvary Spokane, we have some exceptions. So day number 4 basically will take us from Galilee, driving down along the Jordan Valley to see a couple of locations which are very important archaeologically. The most important one, Beit Shan, Skitopolis, is not mentioned in the Bible, but it was the main city in the region. And Jesus, on his way to Jerusalem, going from Nazareth, must have gone by Skitopolis. It's simply on the way. And Skitopolis was one of the cities of the Decapolis. And although it's not mentioned by name, let me remind you what the Bible tells us. After Jesus is casting the demons out from those twain and they drown in the Sea of Galilee, the person that was healed, the demoniac, is asking Jesus to go with him. And Jesus says, "You're not coming with me, but you go to all the cities of the Decapolis and tell them what you saw." The capital of the Decapolis was Skitopolis. So know that the first place this man ran into to share with them the great news would be indeed a city which is not mentioned by name. But we can make that connection very easily to the days of the ministry of Jesus on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Well, today we are leaving Galilee. After a few days exploring the northern part of the country, we start heading south along the Jordan Valley. Before we leave, we're going to stop at the baptism site at the outlet of the River Jordan from the Sea of Galilee. Then we'll proceed south for about half an hour, and we'll get to the entrance of the plains of Armageddon to visit the most important location, second only to Jerusalem when it comes to archaeology, and that will be the town of Beit Shan, Skitopolis. After dedicating some time to explore the site, we're going to go deeper into the plains of Jezreel, Armageddon, to the spring of Harod. We'll speak about Gideon the judge leading his 10,000 people down to the spring to choose 300 of them to go and do battle. And then we'll come back to the Jordan Valley and head all the way down to the Jericho area, right on the northern shores of the Dead Sea, very close to them, to see the baptism site and the point of the crossing, where the Israelites crossed under Joshua the River Jordan to take the land. And then we're going to have a steep climb to go up to Jerusalem, just like the pilgrims used to do in the days of the temple. And boy, that's a climb. We're going to drive through the Judean desert on our way to Jerusalem. And here is the map. These are the things that we are going to see today, and that's the road that we are taking. We are leaving the Sea of Galilee, which is over there, some 650 feet below sea level. And as we're heading south, we're going to drive through the West Bank. You see the name here, and it's hard to see the dotted line, but that will be the area of the West Bank, an opportunity to say a few words about the West Bank as we are driving through it. And then the road will take us to the northern shores of the Dead Sea, which is the lowest place on the planet, about 1,450 feet below sea level. And from that location, a short walk or drive will take us up to almost 3,000 feet. So this is nearly 4,500 feet difference, and it's only about 12 miles. So you do understand that the climb is a climb. And today, in a fancy bus, you can hardly feel that. But walking, after 10 days coming from Galilee and come to very close to your destination, Jerusalem, you are going to struggle with climbing through that desert. There's no water. That's where Jesus was tempted for 40 days in the very same wilderness. That will be such a tough experience that to lift up your spirit, he used to sing Psalms of Ascent. 120 to 134 are called Psalms of Ascent. Tradition was that you are chanting them as you are climbing, ascending up to Jerusalem. That will be the plan for today. We're going to start with Beit Shan or Skitopolis, two names for the same place, because when the Greeks arrived to this area, bringing with them the Greek culture, they brought the language as well. And therefore, all the locations in the country now had new names, Greek names. And the town that was called Beit Shan for many centuries has a new name now, Skitopolis, the city of the Scythians. And we're going to focus on 2 or 3 eras. Because the one that you see down below here is mentioning the days of Saul and David, when King Saul was killed in battle on Mount Gilboa. The Philistine fastened his body and his 3 sons to the walls of Beit Shan. The Bible tells us that will be the first time the place is mentioned. But what we are going to see, the Roman city, that was built nearly 1,000 years later. So we're going to focus on more than one era in the story of Beit Shan. And just to give you an idea how the whole place looks like, number one, we spoke about that formation yesterday, remember? Okay, that will be a man-made hill, a tell, just like Megiddo. What you do not see is more than 30 layers of civilizations are buried one above the other. And when they started excavations of this area in 1989, the top of the hill was 17 feet higher. The archaeologists removed 17 feet that represent few civilizations and centuries because we wanted to stop at the layer that represents the days of King Saul. That was our main interest. But it was not the last layer. So they removed 17 feet of dirt to stop at the one from the 10th century BC. And if you use your imagination to build a wall on top, that will be the wall that the bodies of Saul and his 3 sons were fastened to and rescued later on by the people of Jabesh of Gilead. You go to the last chapter in 2 Samuel, and you have the whole story. About 1 Samuel, about the death of Saul and about this whole episode and how his bodies were rescued by the people of Jabesh. There was a connection between the people of Jabesh and King Saul. Let's have a more decent introduction to Beit Shan. And now I know how to stop and how to move forward. Mark told me everything. Mark, it's not moving. Let me remind you of a very important principle that goes back to the ancient days. Location, location, location. Sometimes when you want to understand why a site is so big and why so much attention was given to it, you need to consider where was the location. In the old days, where knowledge was limited, you need to look for the combination of roads and water. We are standing now at the eastern entrance into the plains of Armageddon. The main trade route of the ancient world was going right through here, going from Egypt down south to Mesopotamia up north. So naturally, a city will be built here in order to enjoy the trade, to guard the entrance to the kingdom, and that was the reason why that location was built here. The name, Beit Shan, meaning the house of the goddess Shan, that was an Egyptian goddess. But the hill that you see behind me is not a natural hill. This is the one site in the country that one can read through the whole history of the land of Israel by looking at the very beginning of human presence and then to see how it evolved from the days of the Bible to the days of the Greeks and then the Romans and then the Christian Romans and then the Muslims and so forth. So that big hill that you see behind me is a formation that we call a tel, and it's made of layers of civilizations, one above the other. Excavations had proven that we speak about close to 30 such layers, each one represents a civilization. And if you wonder why they had to be built one above the other, because they had to be right on the water source. And therefore a town was conquered, set on fire, destroyed. The new town will be built right above the old one. It will be a little smaller. When you keep adding those layers, the hill goes up. In fact, what you see behind me is lower than the top of the hill was when they started excavations here. Because when they started excavating Beit Shan, they wanted to go back to the days of King Saul. And the Bible tells us in the last chapter of 1 Samuel that after Saul lost his life in battle, they brought him, the Philistines, to the walls of Beit Shan and fastened him, his body and his sons on the walls of Beit Shan. So when they started excavations, the hill was higher than the layer that correspond to the days of Saul. So they removed about 17 feet of the hill, and the top of the hill is representing the 10th century BCE. That was the beginning of it. And because the place was so centrally located, it was well documented as well. We have the name of Beit Shan appearing in the execration texts, which were texts that were made by the Egyptian army before going to battle. They used to write the name of the enemy on a piece of clay, a clay doll, and smash it down to the ground, 19th century BCE. We have it in the El Amarna tablets, which was the archive of the Egyptian Foreign Office of the 14th century BC, and Beit Shan is mentioned. And of course, the Bible speaks about Beit Shan as well. But for about 1,000 years, the place was known by another name, a Greek one. It was called Skitopolis, which means the city of the Scythians. We speak about Alexander the Great bringing a whole foreign culture to the area, the Greek culture. And it wasn't just conquest. It was also to Hellenize the world. And the way to do that was by bringing civilians to build colonies, to spread the Greek culture all around the area. So the place that was called Beit Shan is now known by another name, a Greek name, Skitopolis, of the city of the Scythians. It's not mentioned in the New Testament. We don't read about Beit Shan in the days of Jesus, for example, but we can make a connection quite easily. When Jesus is healing the man that was possessed by a demon, he wants to go with Jesus, and Jesus says, "You're not coming with me, but you go to the cities of the Decapolis and tell them what you saw." Skitopolis, Beit Shan, was the capital of the Decapolis, and therefore, no doubt, that demoniac came to the capital, which means Skitopolis, to tell people about what happened on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, about 30 miles away. So we do not know if Jesus ever visited the place, but on his way to Jerusalem. It was a thriving Roman pagan town with about 40,000 people living in it. That was indeed the most beautiful city in the region. It was called the Pearl of the East. So part of the Decapolis, but the only one that was located on the western side of the Jordan. And in one location, you can see ancient Israel, you can see the Hellenic period, you can see the Roman town, you can see the Christian town, and part of the Muslim town as well. So you heard it twice, from me and from my twin. I told you we are not well coordinated. Let me show you now the map once again. The plains of Armageddon are going this way, and just like Megiddo was guarding the southern entrance, the chariot city from Solomon's days, Beit Shan was guarding the eastern entrance. If you occupy the valley, basically, you control, as we said, the trade of the ancient world, etc. What makes Beit Shan so unusual, that in one location, you can see how one civilization is replacing another, especially when it comes to the Christian world replacing the pagan world. Yesterday, we did mention the days of Constantine, and we spoke about the tremendous change in sharing a new religion, how it was done. How do you approach to so many people and try to teach them something new? Well, you can see that in Beit Shan. You can see how the Christian civilization, for the lack of a better term, not religion necessarily then, is replacing the pagan one, which means that temples will have to be replaced by churches. That means that the theater is going to be erased to the ground because all these were connected to the pagan structures and the pagan way of life, which was totally unaccepted when it comes to the Christian way of life. If you lived as a Roman, a big part of your life was spending time in the bathhouse, naked, doing nothing. Well, that will not work well into Christianity. And therefore, bathhouses had to be taken out as well, which means everything that represented the pagan world will have to be destroyed and buried under churches. One religion is winning, the other one is defeated, and the pagan world was not defeated overnight. So you go to Beit Shan and you can see how cleverly things were done. Let me give you one or two examples. If I'm an envoy that was sent to you, the people of Skitopolis from Constantine the Great, try to sell you a new product, how do I even begin to do that? One example. You, the people of Skitopolis, chose a local god which is going to be your patron. For some reason, you chose Dionysus, the god of the drunk, by the way, the god of wine, but that was your choice. He is going to protect your town. Well, we no longer believe in gods. There's only one God that we believe in. But fear not, you will not remain unprotected. May I offer, instead of Dionysus, your patron god, a person, a saint, Saint Peter. You never heard the name, I know. I'll tell you all about him. Is that okay with you, people of Skitopolis? You will not remain unprotected. But instead of a god that doesn't exist, I'm going to offer a saint to be your patron saint. Is that okay with you? What say you? Some will say yes, some will say no. By the way, the temple of the pagan god was made of stone, very nice, but we are going to build a building to our new saint made of marble, much nicer. So who is winning? Who is the winner? You used to go to the theater every day to see a show, and you purchase ticket for the show today. The ticket says Hercules and the Amazons. Just watch and see, right? Well, we are going to have a new show. It's called Adam and Eve. You never heard about them. It happens in a garden far away. They start naked, but then I'm sorry, we have to dress them up. And popcorn is on the house today. Is that okay with you, people of? I'm exaggerating. But you understand the process. You need to show them that what you're offering is better than what they knew so far, and you do that by educating the masses, and so forth and so forth. By the way, what was the biggest celebration in the pagan world? The main celebration that everybody was so happy about, December 25th. What are you celebrating December 25th? Please don't say Christmas, not yet. Well, basically you celebrate the victory of the sun god. In the northern hemisphere, the days are getting shorter and shorter to December 21st. And then, lo and behold, the days are getting longer. Let's celebrate. The sun god is back in life. Let's celebrate his birthday. Well, we will celebrate the birthday, but not of the sun god that doesn't exist, of the Messiah. Is that okay with you? You should see the fireworks. Ooh, they're going to be amazing. So we need to understand how it was done. And in a place like Beit Shan, you sit right in front of you. Let's see if I was able to explain that well enough. Maybe just repeating what I just said, but we'll see. One of the things about Beit Shan, Skitopolis, that we can actually see how one civilization replaced the other. It wasn't always violently. And maybe the most important revolution for the lack of a better world will be the one that led the Roman Empire from a pagan way of life to a Christian one. When Constantine the Great made his decision that Christianity will be a legitimate religion, 313, and then a preferred one, 324, it started an amazing phenomenon. You need to change the mindset of 50 million people, the estimated number of the Roman Empire. You need to basically reach to every individual, change hearts, educate the masses. It takes time. And the pagan world did not disappear overnight. And therefore, you need to educate the people that what they knew so far is totally wrong, and you're going to tell them about the one true God and how to worship him. It's not a simple procedure, and it had to be done peacefully, not violently. And therefore, if you had a chance to visit Roman cities, when this was going on, you will see how the city's appearance had to change as well. Pagan temples will be taken out. Bathhouses was, interestingly, the last one that the pagans are willing to give up. You look at the big facilities that are all connected to pagan manifestations, you need to take them out. And you need to tell the locals that what you're offering is much more important. For example, the concept of baptism. In order to educate the people about baptism, the origin, which is cleansing ritual facilities, you need to find a way to tell the masses that this is something that they can easily accept, and then to tell them the reason to. We are standing by a baptistry, and maybe one of the first ones in the world, because it's right behind the bathhouse. And one would wonder, why locate the baptistry so close to the bathhouse? And why build a church all around it so close to something which is contradicting Christian principles, basically? Christianity is not teaching walking nude or go to the bathhouse and spend time there all day long. So you need to educate the masses why this one is wrong and what you offer is right. And this is speculation, but maybe process went after you do your thing in the bathhouse. Before you go home, let me teach you something new which is related, which will be baptism. And therefore you see a baptistry, you see how small it is. And this may be one of the first ones in the world. It looks like a small water container. It is plastered, and you can clearly see the cross over there. And the whole complex around you, that was a church. The apse is facing west, but that was even before the idea what will be the orientation of churches was even born. Because in most cases, the church is facing east, not in this case. But the important thing is not that the transition from pagan to Christian, it's how it was done. So you see in Beit Shan that one civilization, one religion is replacing the other. And lo and behold, right behind the bathhouse, you find the baptistry. Through its speculations, but the location is very important and intriguing. So Beit Shan is important because of many reasons. One of them, you can really see how the Christian world is replacing the pagan one. Well, Beit Shan was built as a Roman city, and as a Roman city, everything had to be pre-designed, had to be pre-planned, and if you've seen one Roman city, you've seen them all. The idea was that everything is built by one standard. The Romans did not invent that much. They used to embrace a lot of ideas from other cultures and blend them in. But they did invent one thing that is dictating a way of life, even for us today, standards. Everything is done by one standard. You go to one school of engineers in Rome, and everybody builds cities in the same way, temples in the same way. It was simply practical and easy to run a huge system like the Roman Empire if everything is done one standard. How do you design a city? How do you choose a location for a city? Everything had to be done by the book. And fortunately, we do have the book of a Roman engineer, Vitruvius, until this very day. And it gives us amazing information. What will be the logic behind designing a Roman town? And once again, let me see if that will make sense to you. Okay, yeah, here it comes. The Greeks and the Romans were a civilization that admired beauty. What was beautiful for them was also holy. And in order to run such a huge system like the Roman Empire, you could not do that without developing some kind of a standardization. Which means that when you build a city, you need to follow a certain pattern. It made it easier to build. Every engineer went to one school of engineers in Rome, and they could carry the knowledge throughout the empire. And therefore, when you build a Roman city, they expect you to follow a certain pattern. Number one, even locating the site was a whole procedure. Vitruvius, the Roman engineer, tells us that before the Romans decided to build a new town, they will send a team to live on the location, and they will live there for a whole year, taking notes of sunrise and sunset, and humidity, and rain, and wind. And they will bring some cattle with them as well, and let the cattle graze. After a year, they will slaughter the cattle to check the liver. If the liver was healthy, that means that the soil was healthy, and humans can live there and grow crops. If it was not, you go to another location, you start all over again. In the case of Beit Shan, they knew that people lived there before because of the ancient tale. They were not the first civilization here. So procedure was a little different. But you build a city always in the same way. There were two main roads that divided downtown to four quarters. The cardiology, the heart of the city, is the one that we are on. There was a crossroad that went from east to west called the Decumanus. The cardi usually north and south. And the city itself was divided to the four quarters. You have the bathhouses, and you have the theaters, and you have all the other facilities. So this is only downtown Beit Shan. The residential area was much bigger, and the excavations focus only on the part that will bring some better results in a short time. And for that reason, they went to the city center. Since we are geologically in an area that has limestone on the mountains of Galilee and black basalt from the Golan Heights, you see the nice combination of the rocks as well. It looks like a gigantic chessboard when you see the combination of black and white. Look at the floor. The floor is designed in a certain way. It's not leveled. You do see there is a gentle slope that goes to both sides. Because water is so scarce in the area, the town itself had to be designed as a catchment area, and water was collected from the streets, the rooftops, and the courtyards into the cisterns, which are under our feet. You do see the stones that pave the road. It's a tough basalt and not a softer limestone. You do see that the central part, like a spine, was specially designed, and there was a drainage canal right under our feet. So you need to fix something, you can pull up the stone, you can clean it. You do see they were placed diagonally as well. Because if a careless rider will carry his heavy wagon with all the goods for the marketplace, he can easily pull out a stone, so you have to place them diagonally just to protect the stones. Every detail had to be well calculated. And the last thing, it's hard to notice, but we are standing in the bottom of a valley. The mountains of Galilee on one side, the mountains of Samaria on the other side. Think about flash floods. When it rains in the winter, the water can easily bring everything, all the dirt and all the soil, through town. And therefore, they had to collect the flash flood water outside the city and channel everything to one central canal that goes under our feet. So all this downtown Beit Shan basically is a man-made platform, simply to protect the town, not to be covered by flash flood, and all that water was going under the city and was drained down to the River Jordan, which is about 5 miles away from here. Everything had to be, now I know how to freeze the picture. Mark told me, okay, so it's not worry. Everything in the Roman city was also designed not just to be efficient, but it followed a certain mindset. And allow me to take 5 minutes to explain it because it's important. If you could chat with a Roman individual or Greek individual and ask him or her a question, sir, ma'am, where do you stand in relation to your gods? The answer will be, well, I believe that they exist. I believe that they are immortal, but besides that, we are not connected on any level. There are no scriptures. The gods are not demanding anything from us humans. There's no concept of sin. They require absolutely nothing. In fact, when I offer sacrifice to my God, I want to keep him away from me because if the gods are coming closer to me, that's trouble. They lie to each other. They cheat on each other. They set a very poor example for humans, but we have to accept them and we fear them. Which means you speak about the concept, which accepting the existence of deities, but these deities are promising absolutely nothing, let alone eternity. So if you live in a world that your gods are not promising eternal life, what is it that you live for? And the answer is for today. There is a reason why a Roman town was so beautiful. There is a reason why a Roman way of life was dictated by that principle. You go to the theater, you go to the bathhouse, you do the best of this life. There is no eternity. So the beauty of the Roman cities was an outcome of a whole philosophy. If you could ask a Jewish man or woman the same question, where do you stand in relation to God? The answer will be, it's all about him. He gave me life, and if I worship him truly, he promises eternal life. You do understand that these two philosophies could not coexist. And for that reason, the clash of civilizations, the tension was mounting because the Jewish principles and the Greco-Roman ones could not live peacefully. It will lead to a massive war that we're going to speak about in Masada, that will be tomorrow visiting the Dead Sea. The most important part of town was basically the bathhouse. You will spend most of your day in the bathhouse. Doing what? Doing nothing. It wasn't taking a shower for 5 minutes. It was socializing. It was political conspiracies, sometimes assassinations. Everybody could go to the bathhouse, even slaves sometimes. It was the social center of town, and that's how the average Roman will pass his time. So you do understand, if I worship God, I don't promise anything, I don't really worship them, that's how I make the best of my life. And every Roman city had a bathhouse. Now, it wasn't a spa, it was a sauna. We speak about a steam room. Now, Skitopolis, you know how hot it is in the summer? About 120 degrees between May and November. Give me one reason why you want to go to the sauna when it's so hot outside. You want to really sweat? Well, sit outside. You'll evaporate without any problems. It doesn't make any sense. It's not about making sense. It's about what is a Roman way of life, regardless of what are the conditions. I can tell you that in Jerusalem, in the heat of the summer, you will see the ultra-Orthodox Jewish man wearing long, heavy, black coats when the temperature is more than 100 degrees. It's not about being comfortable. That's what makes them ultra-Orthodox. It's part of their life. Same thing with Rome. Regardless if it's hot or cold, it doesn't matter. You cannot call yourself a Roman unless you go to the bathhouse, and that's part of your daily schedule. So you see those bathhouses everywhere. But in order to sustain the system, you need to know how to bring water from far away. You need to keep some hygiene because you understand that that was one of the main problems in the city is how to keep the water clean. Because everybody went to the bathhouse. When Constantine the Great started shutting down bathhouses in Rome, in the city of Rome, 479 bathhouses. You understand that? The largest ones in the world, the bathhouse of Caracalla, if you've been to Rome, 10,000 people. So that was a must facility, and you had it in every town, including Beit Shan, obviously. If you look at what you see in front of you, that's how the bathhouse used to look like. You're looking at the central room. That was called the caldarium, all right? And what you see over here were not the seats. These were columns that were supporting a floor. You would not see those, but it was a functioning bathhouse. And between the floor, among those little pillars, hot air was bellowed in from the furnace that was outside. So you push in the hot air, it accumulates under the floor, heats the floor from the bottom, central heating, just like today, the 22nd century, all right? We do speak 21st century, yes, 21st century. We speak about a very sophisticated system that was found in every single Roman community, every Roman bathhouse, in every Roman villa. We found thousands such bathhouses all around the world of the Roman Empire because that's what typified the whole idea. We are going to enjoy daily life today because there's no eternity. We don't live for eternity, we live for today. And to make you impressed even more because you're so impressed by now, what about latrines? See, these are Roman bathrooms. I kid you not. The people knew about running water, how to flush the toilets, yes. And you find those facilities outside the big theaters. And there was a big one in Beit Shean. We saw the one in Caesarea. Now, you don't see the details, but there was a water canal that goes under the seats. And of course, you're missing the seat itself that was made of timber with a hole in it, obviously. But you do have a shallow water canal here to wash your hands. And behind it, by the wall, there was another canal that went in a very kind of a sharp angle down to wash away the waste outside the city. So think about people coming from the theater, thousands. And this one could accommodate more than 30, 40, 50 people at a time. So once again, one has to admire the standard of living in the Roman city. And Judea was one of the centers of the Roman Empire. And the closer you come to the Roman-Persian border, the more impressive everything will be. Because you want to impress the enemy. You want to make a statement. And whenever a Persian came to visit Rome's territory, he has to be impressed by the beauty of the city, by sophistication of the facilities. So when he goes back home to his Persian colleagues, he has a story to tell about the might of Rome, about the beauty of Rome. So if you live along the borders of the Roman Empire, the Romans were dedicating much efforts to make everything even nicer just to create the right impression. In a Roman city, you go down the main road and you see an amazing facade with nothing behind. Just a facade, but you're impressed by what you see. The roads were paved by mosaics, by marble. It takes money to cover the road with marble, but that's how you create the right impression that you want to make on all the others. We speak about PR. We speak about a psychological warfare. Don't mess up with us. Look who we are. You look at the Roman city. You see the might of Rome. You see the strength of Rome. A Roman town was built to deliver a message. And then the earthquake. Since we are along the Jordan Valley, and since it's an active fault along the Jordan Valley, and earthquakes are not uncommon in the region, every now and then we have those and they cause a lot of damage. Skitopolis was indeed a beautiful city. Another reason for it was the proximity of this Roman territory to Persia. When a Persian came to visit Rome's territory, the first time you set an eye on Rome, you have to be impressed. And for that reason, many of the cities were built just for the show, the huge facades, beautiful ones with nothing behind them to create the impression. And the first time you see a Roman town, basically they deliver a message. Look how strong we are. Look how wealthy we are. Look how mighty we are. It was PR, among other things. And therefore, the Roman towns that were constructed closer to the Persian area, even more efforts were dedicated to make them more beautiful. The streets of Beit Shean were covered with mosaics. You don't see that in too many places. So think about this beauty and splendor that had a political meaning. It was simply to deliver a message. And all that beauty came down in a couple of earthquakes. The first one that was recorded and we know of took place in 363. It left a lot of damage, but that damage actually served the authorities because the Christian world was replacing the pagan one, and all the pagan property that was destroyed during the earthquake, you can use the building material to build churches instead of the ruined manifestations of paganism. And therefore that earthquake was maybe a problem, but it also had to erase the pagan way of life by using the stones of the demolished buildings and to rebuild churches instead of the temples. Another big earthquake took place at 661, and much damage was done as well. But the biggest one that leveled the city to what it is today took place in the 18th of January, 749. This earthquake left an impact not just in Beit Shean, but all around the country. And therefore, what you see around you basically are the ruins of that city that was never rebuilt. When you saw the columns standing in the upright position, that's the work of the archaeologists. It was found as you see it around. Look at this beautiful Corinthian capital over there, and the column that I'm leaning against, 40 tons, 40 tons. Look how beautiful it was carved, how smooth it is. We speak about a civilization that glorified beauty, and that was one way to do. Okay, we are skipping this one because we spoke about that, and we're carrying on with our journey, and we're making our way now into the plains of Armageddon to see Gideon's Spring, which is right here. That will take us back to the days of the judges, and I'm sure that you all have your favorite judge. We won't speak much about them as individuals, but Gideon is maybe the most popular one among the judges. And when the Bible tells us in the book of Judges 6-8 about Gideon's career, it speaks about taking the people down to the spring of Harod, the spring of fear, and to choose 300 of them to lead them to battle against the Midianites. And we know the location beyond any doubt because the Bible gives us enough geographical data. The Bible speaks about a spring that flows at the foot of Mount Gilboa. The Bible said that the camp of the Midianites was on the other side of the valley by the hill of Moreh. Only one spring flows in the area. And therefore, we have to point at the place to say, this is the place that Gideon led his 10,000 men down to the water to choose 300 of them to lead them to battle against the Midianites. We are visiting the spring of Harod, that literally means in Hebrew fear, but biblically it's connected to the mission of Gideon, one of the most prominent judges that the Bible speaks about. And if you go to the book of chapter 6-8, you read about the whole career of Gideon as a judge, and this spring is very important in his story. Number one, we know the location beyond any doubt because the Bible speaks about the plains of Armageddon. The Bible mentions that the army of the Midianites was covering the floor of the valley all the way to a hill called Moreh, and the only spring that flows in the area is the one that you see behind me. And therefore, geographically, that's the only possible location for what the Bible tells us. Speaking about the days of the judges, to remind you, we speak about a time that there was no national leadership. Every tribe basically minded its own business, and because of that, they were very vulnerable. And every now and then, enemies would invade their territory. The Bible tells us that Israel had sinned, and God, to punish them, will send an enemy, and then the Israelites will cry out to God, and He, with His endless mercy, will appoint a judge to save them from the oppressors. Not even once the Bible tells us that there was a national issue or a national leader. It was always a coalition of tribes that suffered from a certain enemy. In the case of Gideon, the Midianites and the Amalekites, and Gideon, therefore, was a leader that led the local tribes of Israel to defeat the Amalekites. But the Bible gives us a lot of information about what was the procedure. When the mission is given to Gideon, he has a hard time to believe that he will be the one to deliver Israel. He's coming from the tribe of Manasseh, a very small clan in the tribe of Manasseh, and he has a problem. When the angel approaches him and tells him that you are going to be the one, have I not sent you? Gideon wants to see some miracles to be absolutely convinced that he is the man for the job. And after he was convinced, he's sending messengers to the local tribes. 32,000 people show up, and of course you know the story. And Gideon tells them, well, if you're fearful, if you build a home, just have a newborn, and you don't want to be with me, go back to your homes. The way the Bible puts it, obviously, is that God intervened and told Gideon, you have too many people. And therefore 20,000 people just disappeared. Think about this young man and what was his mindset, knowing that he's going to confront a huge army and the number of people are diminishing. And God tells him still, you have too many. And then God tells Gideon, take them down to the spring, the one that you see flowing from the cave over there, and tell them to drink the water from the creek. And those of them that will lap the water like dogs, these are the chosen ones that you are going to lead to victory. So down here along this creek, 10,000 people come, maybe in groups of 50 down to the water, and Gideon stands maybe right over there. watching carefully who is the one that laps the water like dog and puts them aside. 300 people were chosen. And these 300 people, Gideon is going to lead to victory. I don't know if you read the whole story of Gideon carefully, because Gideon didn't end well. All right? After having this great victory and being a judge, the Bible says that Gideon is building an image and basically leads Israel astray. We always focus on the nice part of the story. But if you read it all the way through, Gideon's career did not end in such a positive way. Well, we're leaving now the area and heading south along the Jordan Valley. And if you allow me for a few minutes, and there's a lot of information, I'll try to make it as clear as possible. Since we are driving through the West Bank, this is the road that goes along the River Jordan, the West Bank, it's an opportunity to say a few words about the West Bank. And once again, we are mixing the old with the new. I know that you all heard the term the West Bank. I doubt how many of you know exactly what it means. And I promise not to get into any propaganda, just to try to explain what is the West Bank. And if you just ignore all the information, too much is written over there, please try to focus on what I'm trying to convey. In 1947, Palestine, there was no state of Israel, was in the hands of the British Empire that won the area after winning WW1. 30 years later, 1947, after the Second World War, the British Empire had enough. They want to leave the area to go back home. But by then, two people fight for the land. There are the Jews, and there are the local Arabs or the Palestinians. And Great Britain is asking the United Nations that were just born, April 1st of 1945 in San Francisco, by the way, and say, listen, there was a problem here. That should be your job. We are leaving. Try to see what you can do to try to solve the problem peacefully. And the UN is sending a team of 11 members to Palestine. And the team of 11 members is trying to meet with Jewish leaders, with Arab leaders, to try to negotiate to find a peaceful solution. Jewish leaders are more than happy to meet because these are the days after the Holocaust. And the Jews are desperate to have a home. And whatever the UN was offering, we could not say no. The Arab leaders had a very clear position. This country is Muslim, the Jews have no right in it whatsoever, and therefore we are not negotiating. Once the British are leaving, we are going to throw them into the ocean, period. A very simple message. And therefore, the team of 11 tries to meet and tries to negotiate, but there were no negotiations. And they came to the conclusion that partition is the only possible way. So they take the land called Palestine and they draw a map, divide the area to two future national homes. The red, the green, the yellow area over there will be the future Jewish state. The brown area will be the future Arab/Palestinian state. And according to their idea, Jerusalem will be an international city. Jerusalem is too important to be the capital of the Jewish or the Arab, and for that reason, that will be a secluded area that will be governed by an international tribunal. That was the idea. And they bring it to the United Nations General Assembly to vote for it. And they vote for it on the 29th of November, 1947. And after they vote for it, two things happened, basically. Number one, a Jewish state was born. What about the other one? The UN said very clearly, we speak about two national homes. One will be the Palestinian state, one will be the Jewish state. Now, you know very well that there was no Palestinian state. So what happened? Well, if I'd asked you the question and you don't know anything about the region, you would have told me there is no Palestinian state because you, the Jews, conquered their territory, and because of you, there was no Palestine. Nonsense. Nonsense. Nonsense again. Please check the facts. What happened was the following. After the departure of the British, when the Arab armies invaded Israel's territory, a war started that we call the War of Independence, and they called it a disaster. You understand who won and who lost here. But the area that was allocated to the future Palestinian state, this one and this one, was now taken by the Arab countries that seemingly came to help the Palestinians in the war against Israel. After the war was over, the area that was supposed to be a Palestinian homeland was occupied by the King of Jordan. The King of Jordan, Abdullah I, sent his army into the Palestinian territory to help them in the war against Israel. And after the war was over, he simply refused to leave. Basically, he proclaimed this area to be part of Jordan. That's the West Bank. The West Bank, therefore, is a geographical term. It's the West Bank of the River Jordan, a piece of territory that was supposed to be a Palestinian state. They refused to take it. The king of Jordan that sent his army to help them decided to keep it. And for that reason, the Palestinian state was never born. The same thing happened in Gaza. That was also supposed to be Palestinian territory, but guess what happened? The Egyptians that came to help the Palestinians decided to stay. And therefore, there is no Palestinian state until this very day, because the land that was offered to them by the United Nations that they refused to take to begin with was taken, stolen, occupied, you choose the terminology, by the Arab countries. So the West Bank is basically a piece of territory that was supposed to be Palestinian, taken by the Jordanians. In 1967, the Six-Day War, Israel liberated the whole area. Now it's in Israeli hands. So people say, give it back to the Palestinians. Back? It was never theirs. It was offered to them. They refused to take it. Jordan took it. We were attacked by Jordan. We liberated it. And we are to be blamed for all the problems and chaos in the Middle East. You hear some bitterness in my voice. So next time people speak about the West Bank, it was always Palestinian. You should give it back. Keep in mind, it was never Palestinian, and we never took it from the Palestinians. If anything, we took it from Jordan, that occupied it illegally. So when you say occupied territories, yes, Jordan occupied the territory illegally, not Israel. We took it from the occupier. You understand how complicated that situation is? You don't, huh? Don't be too upset. Nobody does. But we need to know some basic facts. And for me as an Israeli, yes, I have an agenda here. But I try to stick to facts and not to propaganda. The Palestinian state wasn't born because the land that was given to them was simply taken by the brothers and sisters, the king of Jordan and the president of Egypt. So driving along the West Bank, that's basically the story that we are telling to try to explain. Because many people hear the term West Bank. It's so dangerous. Why do we even go through there? It's not dangerous. It's part of Israel. It's very peaceful. And this is the simple part of the story. So as we're heading along the West Bank, the next stop and the last one will take us now to the outskirts of Jericho to go to the baptism site. And I know that the water doesn't look that inviting, as you can tell. A lot of mud over there, but hey, it's a River Jordan, so don't be too picky, okay? If you want to get baptized in the Jordan, there are two places to do that. And one is outside Tiberias, and this is the other one. Usually, people go to the other one because it's more clean. But to be more authentic, to be absolutely honest with you, when John the Baptist was leading people down to the Jordan to be baptized, most likely opposite to Jericho, this location. When Jesus came down in Luke chapter 3 and was baptized in Luke chapter 4 by John the Baptist, most likely in this location. And from here, the Spirit took him into the desert on the way to Jerusalem, so that will be a more authentic site, speaking about the baptism. After 40 years walking through the Sinai desert, after Moses died and was buried by God himself on the mountains which are way behind me, the top of Mount Nebo, Mount Pisgah, Joshua is ready to cross the River Jordan. You can easily sense the excitement mounting when the big day arrives. And the Bible tells us in the book of Joshua chapter 3 the details. Joshua tells them to be ready for the Greek crossing. And the following day, the priests are carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and the whole nation goes a distance behind them. And as their feet touch the River Jordan, and the Bible tells us that Jordan was in the flood stage, which means around springtime, they're going to celebrate Passover soon, the water stops and recedes about 20 miles north to a place called Adam. Think about this river, dry or maybe muddy riverbed, and the whole nation is about to cross. The Bible says it happened in a place called Gilgal, which we do not know the exact location, but nearby. And the Bible says that the priests were ordered to take 12 big stones, each one for the tribes of Israel, to build like a bridge, so the whole nation can cross on that bridge. Think about this long column. Only one crossing point. We speak about millions of people. That will take the whole day, no doubt. And right after the last one stepped out of the water, the priest collected the stones and placed them on the bank of the river, marking the place of the crossing. And then the river fed into the Dead Sea once again. So that's where the conquest started. That's where the place where the Israelites are finally going to cross into the promised land. And Joshua will lead them to 7 years of battle, 7 years of conquest, and the first target to take was Jericho. So Jericho is located nearby. It was important to start in Jericho because the only decent road that goes up to the mountains without going rock climbing will be the Jericho Road. Maybe that's the reason, and that was the plan. If you cross the river opposite to Jericho, this will be the shortest way to pass, conquer the city, and then the road up to the mountains will be open for the Israelites, and that's exactly what happened. Okay, folks, here's the map that will take us up to Jerusalem. Tomorrow, we are going to speak about the Dead Sea, and then we're going to have 3 sessions that will be dedicated to Jerusalem. So tomorrow, days 5 and day 6, we'll speak about the Dead Sea. We'll go to Masada, which is the national site for the state of Israel. We'll take a cable car ride to get up to the top. Don't freak out, it's an easy ride to take. We're going to walk the waterfall of Ein Gedi to speak about the encounter of David and Saul in one of the caves in the area. And then we're going to speak about the Dead Sea Scrolls in the site of Qumran, an amazing discovery, no doubt, and some controversy about issues, but nobody's questioning the authenticity of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Other questions about who wrote them, under what circumstances. They are authentic, there's no doubt whatsoever. And then, days 6, 7, 8, we're going to really dive in Jerusalem and get to know the city in details, including every stone of significance, which is important for a tour in the country. So once again, I apologize for some of the technological glitches. I think that this session was a little better, and I owe you 2 minutes and 38 seconds, which I promise to pay back tomorrow. Thank you for coming, and have a good night. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you.